Hi everyone, welcome back to the studio. Well, we're going to do something a little bit different here during the holidays. We're going to put up some videos that I filmed. This one 6 years ago. We're even going to do one that I did 12 years ago. But today we're going to take a look at how do you go about painting birds. A very beginner lesson, and it talks a lot about drawing them, what kind of strokes, textures, paints, everything. I even go into detail about the brushes I use and why. And they go hand in hand with a series of books. Now, here on YouTube, you don't see me mention my books very many times, but I've written over 60 books. And this one, like this one you see here, is, I did it all about birds and all about the different techniques of birds. And it's called A Garden of Birds. So in this particular video we're going to do today, I'm going to feature and show you some of the lessons out of A Garden of Birds, Volume 1, our very beginning lesson. Now, this is 6 years ago, and today there is one addition that I would make to this lesson that you're going to watch. And again, it's over 2 hours. It's in depth for those, especially for those of you that really want to learn how to paint some of the birds. There's only one addition that I would make. In the consistency of the paint part of this video, I use a technique where I take the paint and I take extender medium and I mix them up into these little containers. And I still do this all the time in the studio. I do it, especially portraits. This is some of my portrait colors. And they stay for years like this. But when you mix it up like that, you get a longer drying. It dries very, very slow. And it's a great way to do it. But today, we started about 2 years ago, Deravan manufactured the open medium. So this is the only change that I would make really to the technique. Instead of mixing up, you can still mix up extender and do it like I show you in the video and describe it in the book, or you can just mix open medium, about 20% open medium with the paint here, and just mix it up and go right directly to painting. It is exactly at the right consistency to paint. Okay, so that's the only thing. So if you want to use your acrylics more extended, more open time, have several hours to work with them, use the open medium, 20% your paint, add about 20% to your paint. Put them in a little cup like this, little souffle cups that you can get at any restaurant supply, Costco, anything like that. And then mix it up, and you can store your paints like that. I love the open medium so much, I get it in big tubs. So it lasts wonderful, works wonderful. And you'll see me use it in a lot of other videos here, but it came out about 2 years ago, okay? Other than that, everything else applies. I'm going to show you how to draw them, how to make a plan, how to figure out how to add accent flowers. It's a very long video, but again, it will help all of you, especially in some of you advanced painters, understand some of the very beginning techniques that you might go back and pick up some other stuff on, okay? So it goes hand in hand with our Garden of Birds painting series. I'll be showing you Volume 1. I have several volumes of these books here with painting birds. And then links to all these books, if you're interested in it, is over in the video section there. And we even have a little discount code on that there. So if you use that discount code as you're checking out, you get a discount, okay, for the holidays. It'll be wonderful and stuff, okay? Alrighty, let's get into that video. Oh, remember, it's 6 years ago, so a little thinner, a little less gray, but it's a lot of fun, okay? All right, see you on the other side. Hi, welcome to the Jansen Art Studio. I'm David Jansen. Welcome to a fun video and book combination where we're going to start a whole new series here at the Jansen Art Studio where we call it the Art of Painting. And what I mean by the Art of Painting, we're still going to use our very, very popular Paint It Simply techniques, but I'm going to expand these into what we call the Art of Painting. Now, excuse me, what I mean by the art of painting is I'm going to walk you through the thought processes that I use to create paintings so you can then in turn use those to grow your own techniques or take your own journey to create your own paintings. Okay, so many times I've spent my life 35, 40 years in the decorative painting industry, and it seems like in the last 25 years of decorative painting, it has become very much project based, and everyone wants to know exactly how you've painted that painting step by step. They don't want to go out into thinking anything beyond it. They just want to recreate that painting. And that's very fun. That's very fine to do. But we have created this whole generation of artists that really don't know all the concepts for and mythology for developing their own paintings. Whereas I was raised into the 70s, and that's what we did. And that's what I want to show you. I want to walk you through it. Whether or not you choose to follow down this whole path of the art of painting, or continue as a project-based lesson painting, that's all up to you. We just want to present you with as many possibilities as possible here at the Jansen Art Studio, okay? So let's get into the painting. First, what we're going to do is I have the book here. This is The Garden of Birds, our book. That textbook that we'll be following along. And so this video is made really just to enhance the step-by-step process that you'll find here into this book. Okay, starting right up into the front part of the book, one of the very first things that I tell you to do is you have to make a determination as an artist how you're going to render that image. In other words, how you're going to build that image. And, you know, in producing videos, we use this word called render. We render an image. So I may shoot a video, and then when that video is done, the computer will process it into the different formats that we will use to make it a web video or make it a DVD and so on and so forth. And so it's called rendering. So I use that term a lot. And basically, I do the same thing when I'm going to go paint a painting. So what I'm going to do is, in this series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow right along, and I'm going to explain to you about how I go about rendering and making a plan in a step-by-step process. We'll paint a painting right here, and we'll go through following a little bit about along the book. So the first thing here is rendering your painting and making a plan. So here on page 5, we have the making a plan. And I give you basically what I'm going to do. And one of the very first things that I have to do is I'm going to find myself some type of inspiration. Now here what I'm doing is I just went to Google Images, which are free images to use on the web. You can find all different kinds of images. This is a female chaffinch. I love her. As a matter of fact, I love a lot of the female species of the birds because I like things that are not too bright or ostentatious. And a lot of the male species, of course, nature puts them out there to make them bright and colorful to compete for the female's attention. And I really don't like that. I think the females are some of the prettiest birds, in nature. And so I love to paint the females. I painted already the male chaffinch. If you want to paint this one and then go find the male chaffinch, I painted him in another pattern packet. But the female, and she's kind of brownish tone here, and this is your common chaffinch, and she has orangey legs and a little bit of yellow undertone in here. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But I have to decide as an artist. Now, I don't think this is a really great picture of her. I'm going to soften some of this out, get rid of some of these areas in here, and tone this down. I'm going to change her too. She's a little bit narrow thin. She looks a little undernourished, so we'll puff her out here just a little bit. And I'm turn her. She's a little bit too pointed to put within a painting, so we'll turn her just a little bit. But the first thing that I have to do is decide about how I'm going to render this image. So I'm going to make my plan for my painting, okay? So I have that out. Now, what do I mean by render an image or making a plan for the painting? Well, one of the first things you have to do, and here's some of the paintings that I did in the book. Here's the little tree sparrow that I did. And you have to determine when you go about painting something like this, is this how much detail you're going to give here into this little guy here. And in this type of painting in here, I'll be using my finger to actually create the movement of the feathers. And then I'll be using a liner brush and my little number 4 brush to create some of these other areas. And I love to take some specialized time in and around the face and the colors of the beak, like blank right in here to make sure that I capture that image pretty close to what I want. And one of the things I'm thinking about as I'm doing this is how close to real do I want to make this image? Over here with the goldfinches that I had here. These are the goldfinches. Now, I like the look of a painting. I like to make them look like a painting. And so I don't like to render them completely towards realism. This one I go a little bit closer towards realism into the bird, being a little bit more careful, using some negative feathering techniques here on this one, and I use a halftone technique to the painting itself. But you know, when I look at a painting, I like, or a bird, in this case the birds, I like to decide, do I want to make it a painting now, and where do I want that interest? Now you notice in and around her, there's a lot of interest right here in her, and I'll say this in the lesson, and that's because she's got to come up in competition with him, and he's got these bright colors right here that want to push him forward, and she has to compete with that. So we put a little shadow in here and down like this, but I have to decide how close to real do I want to make her. And I wanted it a little bit more real up into this area of her face, and then I wanted her body to kind of drop off. So I don't do as much detailing into feathers. I don't do as much work here on the flight feathers or the coverts. I don't put any too much work onto that and up into the mantle area on her. I don't worry about that too much, as that's where I'm going to let it go more, not render it as a realistic bird, but just render it as an area of color and color movement, so that your eye is drawn into her. So you see her down here, which I want her to be, you know, as part of important, that interaction between him and her right there. That's what I want. So you can render them slightly more real. You can render them with an area of interest and an area that goes out. I love this one, the Eastern Bluebird, that I do first here into the book. It's the first lesson here in the book. And it's got some lovely areas in here, lovely detailing up into the beak, this area. And then back down in here, I'm doing a lot of this just with my finger, pushing colors around. So I grab a lot of movement here into the painting, but and set him into the painting. And I want this to be a painting. I don't want this to be a capturing something that's very realistic, okay? And I work a lot from photos. When I paint the shrike, one of the things I did with the shrike in the second lesson was I took pictures of him when I was in Nebraska, and you know, you see him out on this pine tree, and because of the depth of field of the camera, when I took that picture, you see the pine trees that are actually 100 feet behind him, pretty much in detail also. But he will compete against that detail. So if I came in here, right in here, and put too much detail in any of this work into here, this poor little Eastern Bluebird that's right here sitting in the top of a pine would also compete against that pine, and you would have yourself a little bit of a problem of depth of field. So in the Shrike lesson, you'll see me just kind of smooth everything out, put him into place, paint a little bit of pine up into the front of him. Okay, in the actual photo, that's not what's happened. You see all this movement of this pine tree. So as an artist, what I have to determine right away is, am I going to paint it as a painting? And some places in that painting, I may have to push back as lost edges, some as found edges. And I'll have a whole section of the book on lost and found edges. But if there's a painting of a bird, you want the bird to stand out. Okay, so there's a couple questions you answer right away. Is it a painting of a bird, or is it a painting of flowers in a bird? And so that determines the importance of it. And then one of the most important ones is, how real are you going to render that bird? Okay, and with that, you set up your plan, okay, as to how you're going to paint it. And this plan is this process at which you're going to present this painting. So we're going to have this little chaffinch, and I started a quick sketch of her down here. And what I do is I just kind of proportion the body. So I turned her just a little bit here. And what I do is, just like I show you sketching into the book, so once you have some of your plan and stuff, then what I do is we learn a little bit about rendering the bird image, about what we're going to do here, what I just talked about, creating a vignette painting, which we'll talk about here in a second. The anatomy of the bird, I put this in here because this is really kind of important. It's just like I said in a lot of the floral videos, we talk about the 3 circles of the rose, and you don't need to go in there and say, okay, I need to learn about all this, the stamen and the pistils and all of the sepals, on the bottom of the rose. You don't need all that, but you need to have some kind of idea for the anatomy so that we can talk to each other, about, as artists, and you have a good idea about what that you're going to paint. And normally when I come in here, the bird has its most of us understand the flight feathers right down in here. But there are usually 3 sets, and I think there's like 3 in each set or more of the flight feathers between the primaries, the secondaries, and the tarsals flights. And then you have the greater coverts and the medium coverts up here, what a lot of people confuse with as feathers. The mantle that's up here, the nape of the neck, the eye ring, and like the little cheek areas here, and the scapulars and stuff. So some of these, what I do, and I mentioned it here in the book, some of these I pretty much get rid of, but some of these I will end up keeping into the bird. It depends on how realistic I'm going to do a bird. For example, I may take those scapulars and that mantle and just kind of move it into one area. Or on some birds, if I want more interest to the face here, if I want this really interest to the face, I may take your median coverts and your greater coverts and just kind of move them into a covert here that's, which is a small feather covering the flight feathers that are down here. And I may not even distinguish too much between primary, secondary, and tarsal flight feathers. Okay, matter of fact, I usually get rid of some of those. I just put in primary ones. So how you're going to feather it and everything is going to be part of your plan. So we have the anatomy here of the bird that we want to look at here. So when I go to sketch here, so after I have the anatomy, I go in and I show you a little bit about making a quick sketch and refining it. So when I put this one in here, what I did was I came in and I said, okay, her head's going to be here more of an oval shape. So I came in here and I put in the oval. And her body is going to be this oval shape that's going to be here like this. So I started by drawing this oval shape that I want her right here. I also put in the wing as another oval area that's going to come here, and then the tail is going to go here. Then I sit down and I look at how I want to do that, to actually sketch her. And if you get into more detailed drawing, she has a little bit more of a pointed head. If I want to turn her, her head will flatten out and it'll go a little bit higher right here. This point right here will come down and the beak will come in a little bit farther right in here on the head this way. And that will turn her head. That will turn her head towards you, where the head starts to occupy further to the beak. Here you see the head line, or the neck line, the nape of the neck, and the beak stopping at right about the same time. The beak comes in just a tiny bit. But if I bring that in here like this, now that line doesn't come here, that line comes here and here, her head will turn slightly. So we'll be able to turn her from there. And then there's that oval, and I drop that down just a little bit. We filled her belly. I filled her belly up here just a bit more. We have your primary flight feathers right here. You have your greater coverts and media coverts right here. We may distinguish those a little bit. She has the Chaffis has a white little edge on those, so those are kind of pretty. We'll see how we're going to paint those. And most of the detail I'm going to want right in here. So that's where my idea is. That's my idea of rendering her and establishing my idea here. I will then make a quick sketch of, maybe, okay, we're going to put her right here. We'll maybe drop a line in here like this, which is a line that's going to follow here what is going to happen with her, a movement line with there. I also like to put a counter line of movement in like this down somewhere. And this is what's going to help me decide, okay, I'm going to draw some flowers or some blossoms out here. And I'll push these out to the sides here and down, kind of filling up into this area. Some of them I may want to put underneath her, but we'll kind of decide this flow of this area here. This is your interest area. I don't want to get too much going on up here around her head because I want her to set separate of that. So, but I may, just for interest, push a few others right out through here, watching the outline of my design and where I'm going to do, but I may put a few other little things back up in here, but that don't compete too much with her, and continue those lines down, and we'll kind of fill up. That'll give us some ideas here, kind of seeing where everything is going to go. Okay, so it just kind of gives you an idea. Don't have to get it super refined. Now, the other way I do things is, and I do it a lot, is I actually use Photoshop and I place birds into flowers. So I'll take a bird picture, superimpose it on top of some flower pictures, and position them around and see if I like that kind of stuff. But on the chaffinch and some of these flowers, I painted them so much, and after you paint through some of the designs of the book here, you'll be able to do this pretty easy. Just pick out some flowers that you might want to do. Just remember, if it's about the bird, then you've got, and this is going to be your detail area, don't collide a flower right here where you have to put a center right there. That's going to compete against her. Leave a little bit of negative area right around her into that area of her head, so she stands clear of everything that you're going to do with your birds. Okay, so there's that. Let's go look at some paint. One of the things that we're going to do as we paint her is we're going to talk about the consistency of the paint. So I have all different kinds of ways in which I use paint. The one thing that I do with these birds is I paint a lot of alla prima techniques. We're going to use a fumato technique. We're going to use a halftone technique. I'm going to show you all of those. But the consistency of the paint is so very important. So into the book here, as you get going in through the book here, I put some sections in here on the consistency of the paint and the types of consistency that I use on the paint. It's very important, and that consistency is over here on page 15. You'll see that. It's right after the feathering techniques. Okay, and you'll see my palette, a normal palette that I paint with there. I use these acrylics, and these acrylics that I use, the heritage acrylics that I'm using here, are very thick, and that's the way I like them. I like them really, really thick. Let's take a look at this here for just a moment. Get a nice thing. This is my titanium white, okay? Now, what I do is I put these out into a container, and I decided here on this painting that I'm probably going to add some burnt sienna. I have a list of all the palette colors that we use. Is basically the 6 colors of the Painted Simply, your red violet, your Naphthol Red Light, Hansa Yellow, Phthalo Blue, black and white. I then added some burnt umber on some of them. Every once in a while, you can add that to your palette to touch into. You can add the burnt sienna, and you can also add the pine green. Pine green is just a nice, real quick, medium green. In the Painted Simply, I do a lot of greens from yellows and blacks and tiny bits of blue. I have all of these colors in the color section of the book to show you what I do. But I decided on today's painting to use some burnt sienna. In my last painting, I used it all up, so I just mixed up some more here just about 15 minutes ago. And when I put this all together here, I just squirted out some paint, and then I added about 20% or so of extender. So you can see this paint here is really thin, which means I'll have to use it in combination with other paints. I usually don't like to paint with this thin. So if you're just mixing up for the first time, what I usually do is I put it out in a cap like this, or I put it out into the global palette. This is just a little souffle cup that you can get. They're really inexpensive. They have a nice little snap-on lid you can put it on. We have these. We're now starting to carry these into the studio. These have a nice snap-on lid. You could just cover your whole palette at a time. But it's a little bit thin, and so I'll just leave it open like this for just a couple of days. And about, every few hours I just give it a quick stir with the end of my brush. And what will happen is these paints will start to thicken up. Now, like here's black. Here's black at the consistency I like to paint with. You can see now it's a lot thicker here, into this, onto my thing here. It's very, very, very thick. You can't do this with that burnt sienna there right now. It's not thick enough. So this is just black that's been out for a couple of days, and every few hours or 6 hours or so, I just give it a nice stir like this to stir it up. And so what happens is the water's coming off of the paint, and the extender is staying, and now you'll have a paint that will dry really, really slow. If you leave your paints out like that for several days, and you let that color really all that water evaporate out, and you place it with extender, you can get paints on here. We've had, stay wet up to 30, 36 hours here at the studio. So you can get very long extended drying times with it. My white, I like even thicker yet. As a matter of fact, we manufacture the white a little thicker than all the others because I love it very, very thick. It's even more than toothpaste, which you'd find in toothpaste. And I use it like this because I like to use the edges of the brush, and I like to use it in feathering techniques. And I need this combination of this really thick white. And Sargent said that color should be thick enough to flow together. And so my whites really, I really like my whites to be quite thick so that they, as I push them together like this with my finger and stuff, my colors, that they still maintain a little bit of the individuality. If they're really wet, they will not do that. They will mix together really fast. So I like my colors really thick. It's always easier as an artist to thin down the paint with a little bit of extender than to try to make it thicker during the painting process. So if all in doubt, use your color thicker. And if you're an acrylic painter, and I make this caution in the book, if you're an acrylic painter, you're used to thinner colors. And so sometimes those thinner, that feeling of the thinner colors is going to hurt you with the techniques that I use here in the book, where I use a lot of thicker color techniques. We do not use flow. We don't use bottled acrylics. We do not use flow type of acrylics either. They're too thin for these type of techniques. So if you have heritage and you have heritage straight from the tube, you can mix it in with some extender and then just let it dry up there just a little bit. And you can keep it in the caps like this. You can keep it in the global palette. We have lots of that kind of information on the studio. In the book, I have a whole section on making global colors and how we do it, and you can use it in the global palette that way. And just remember, they are an acrylic, and if you don't protect them well enough by putting saran wrap over them or something and snapping that lid on, they will dry out on you. So if you're going to use them for long term like that, make sure you take care of them properly, okay? Because they are an acrylic, and all paint dries, okay? So let's go on and let's take a look at some brushes. Some of the fun brushes that I use during the painting process here, I have a couple of them out here, for you to take a look at. And I've used these for several years into painting. I use the Global Arts, the Fusion brushes that I have here. And this is a number 8 round. I used to use this all the time on the birds and stuff until Georgia talked me into trying the 4 one time, and I fell in love with the 4. It's like the liner brush. This is the Raphael liner brush I use all the time. It's the 16684 number 3 quill. It's natural hair quill. These brushes here, they emulate squirrel hair. They're very, very soft, and so you can sit there and hold them with paint and fan them out and get all kinds of different feathering types of techniques with them. But the brush being so soft that it will just drag that color, and it won't push to blend that color quite as fast as a synthetic does. So, and these are, like I say, these emulate the older squirrel hair brushes. This is a natural hair brush, but these emulate the old squirrel hair brushes. And so they give you just a wonderful soft brush technique. I don't paint birds with any of the newer synthetic brushes. They're just too stiff. These are my favorite brushes to paint with, the Fusions. We call them the watercolor too because we also use them in watercolor. So the quill gets done with some real fine detail work. I then go into this one, which is like a moderate detail work. Many times I'll finish a bird completely with this brush, depending on how much detail that bird is going to have. What's my plan? How much do I want to detail that bird with? If I'm painting a 2-bird combination like the goldfinch, the goldfinches that I have in the book, maybe she gets rendered with the quill and he gets rendered with the 4. So she has a little bit more detail to her that brings her in front of him. That's part of my plan, part of my thought process. Then I go to the 8, and then I use my flats here for larger areas of the paintings to render large areas of feathers, okay? then any of these will work in the negative feathering techniques, which I'll show you as we get into painting, okay? So these are the basic painting brushes, along with the big 3/4 inch brush that we use to generate the backgrounds and the vignettes of the painting here, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Let's go take a look at the painting. Okay, back into some of the basic shapes of the painting is what we're going to be looking at. Now, when you're starting to visualize how you're going to be doing the bird, the basic steps, basic shapes of the bird, I put in a couple of things that I do want you to keep in mind all the time. Right after the design, here, part of it on page 9, you're going to see contour feathers and feather lengths. That's something that's very important. And so we had a nice picture of her up here, and you'll see the length of the feathers. Basically on the bird, the smaller feathers are up here and around the face and the beak, between the face and the beak in this type of area here. And then the feathers will go up and around, contouring to the shape of the head. That is extremely important because that gives flow to the body of the bird here. So that is very, very important. The other thing that's very important is that they stay very small. So I may be using just small taps in here, slightly longer strokes down through here, longer strokes down through here, so the feathers get larger, especially as you get down to the flight feathers. When you see an area like this where I have black and white and they're overriding each other, and this is the beauty of the heritage and one of the reasons why I use the thick-bodied heritage paint. See, this white sits right with that black. It does not blend. If you use too thin a paint, it's going to blend in there, but the thick-bodied paint is going to hold that together there. So that's one reason why we need this nice thick paint. If you get thin, it's just going to bleed out and it's just going to blend and it's going to give you all kinds of problems. And it may not be your technique at all. It's the consistency of your paint, okay? So that keep in mind. But we have all of this contour. So here's a nice little thing that I wrote here about the contouring of the bird. How you're going to think about the contouring, okay? So basically we have here, we're going to be dividing up. Now, here's the basic steps that I put on here, starting on page 11 here, basic steps before feathering your bird. And one of the things you're going to keep in mind in all the time is on your painting here, as part of your plan, where you're going to put found edges, really defined edges of the painting, and lost edges, edges that recede down. And notice that keeps your focal vision right in here onto the bird. So that's very important. You have to decide here. Okay, and then we'll pick out our brushes, decide our brushes for that, which we just talked about, and then we'll continue down here with some of the basic steps. So the basic steps is to kind of find an undertone for the bird, establish that undertone, establish some shadow, soften the whole thing with your finger, and then you're ready to establish the movement of the feathers and go into some feathering techniques, which I go on to right here. So let's take a look at the bird we're going to paint here with us as we talk about some of the techniques into the bird. So back to our little chaffinch here. I have my brushes here that I'm going to be putting out. Here. I'm going to grab a bigger brush. It doesn't make a difference whether you decide to start rendering your bird with a large brush or a small brush. A small brush is a lot of time, but it doesn't really make a difference. Sometimes I'll start right directly into the background, then that's fine too. The thing is about an artist, when you're an artist, you're going to render an image. And when you're going to render this image, I want all my paintings to be different. And so I like to breathe life into all of my paintings, where I have birds or painting roses or anything like that. And part of that process is to never repeat yourself too many times. In other words, I create this technique and then I'll do variations of these types of techniques all the time so that each painting is a little different. I have this idea and this plan of where I'm going to go with this painting. But then that plan is fluid. It can change. It can go this way. It can go that way. And that's what keeps the paintings interesting and full of life. That's what you need to do, okay? So sometimes you'll see me come in here and start the background here on our bird. Sometimes I'll come in and just render the bird first. Since this is going to be a painting about the bird, this is going to be the detail area that I'm going to want in the bird in here. I'll start up into this area here. Now we'll look at our little chaffinch here, and we'll find some of the undertones. Now the undertone is not the darkest shadow tone. area that you're going to have. You'll see kind of into here, you'll see kind of her shadow tone. Her actual undertone that we're going to have here is a really kind of a toned yellowy kind of color in here. She'll have lighter yellow tones that'll be up into this area. But since we're turning her, I know the actual chaffinch, and I've looked at a lot of chaffinch birds. She will have a lot of light area right in here because she'll actually be turned into light. And in here, and this is what helps to look at lots of photos, but in here she'll have a lot of light into the breast area that comes down through here. And you can just see a little bit of it right in here. That actually extends down into her, down into this area of her body here. So we're going to add some of that. But her basic undertone is going to be somewhere right in here, a real toned kind of a yellow. This will be some of the shadow tone. Now we'll change that as we go out here into her primaries and into her secondary types of flight feathers. We'll go towards brown. This has a lot of light on here. This deep brown that's here is normally her. So look at a few photos and stuff of the, have a few photos out. The mantle up here also goes to kind of a brown. So I may change that undertone a little bit from bird to bird. Sometimes on a bird, like a yellow goldfinch, like the male yellow goldfinch, you may use that same tone for most of the body, and then a little bit different on the back, the black areas. Okay, so we're going to find kind of a nice toned yellowish kind of color. So let's establish that first. I'm going to pull down some Hansa Yellow that's here. Okay, and again, there's all different kinds of techniques that I'll use there. So follow the techniques that I do in each of the lessons. Sometimes I'll start the background. Many times I'll just push color into the background and then start the bird. But I'm going to start an undertone here so you can see that. And then I'll show you can do the background right after that, okay? So we'll push an undertone here. We're going to take a little bit of Hansa Yellow. And I'm going to juicy that up with just a bit of extender. So it is a little bit loose, so I can just move it around the bird here quite easy. I'm going to tone this down. Now, how do you tone it down? Any kind of brown you could use. You could use the red and black, which is a brown. Okay, the 2 parts red, 1 part black. That gives you a beautiful, I should see that on camera, where that does that, and I'll mix that in, and that gives me this beautiful undertone. If I feel it looks a little bit too red, I just increase the black of it here, and I'll get that kind of all the way to that kind of greenish undertone that works really, really well when you're doing a goldfinch or something like that. So there's some beautiful kind of a greenish undertone, beautiful kind of brownish undertone. That burnt sienna makes beautiful tones for this as well. Kind of an orangey kind of undertone, nice warm orangey kind of undertone, which is pretty close to what she is. I can cool that right down with a little bit of violet or a little bit of black, and I get a beautiful kind of tone. And that will also make a nice shadow tone down for here for her. So that's a pretty good tone. Use the Hansa Yellow, a little bit of the burnt sienna, maybe a bit of black. The most important thing here is this tone changes throughout the entire body. And one of the questions that I asked, that I answered the other day on Facebook and stuff with a very experienced painter, she was asking me this question: how do you know to make the same color all the time? That's the difference. Starting right now, you will never want to make the same color twice. Then your bird doesn't have interest. Remember that. I go to mixes like this not to create the same color. I go to mixes like this because look at all of this beautiful color in here. All of that works. All of those colors. Look at her right in here. Look at all those beautiful colors. That's all of her right in there. That's what I got to lift all of those out and push those all into that area there. They're all different, okay? They're all different. That's what you want. You want to have that difference and that variations to it. So I do brush mixing for variation, not to copy the same types of colors or tones that you see, okay? So we want to vary it. So I'm going to come down here. Let's take a little burnt sienna, maybe a little black, a little Hansa. I'll thin this just a bit to get a little bit of a motion here with that. And I'm going to come right in here and I'm going to establish the undertone on her. Sometimes I'll leave it a little lighter where I will want the highlights, or we're going to go to a lighter color here in the breast area. I'm going to take this up onto her scapulars a little bit, or basically I just call this whole area here the mantle. in a lot of the paintings. I just call the whole area, just for simplicity, the mantle. This front part up here, those calls her scapulars, and then her coverts right up through here. We'll put a little bit of that down through there. We might even streak a little bit, just like this, just to get some of that tone into her flight feathers. Maybe a touch of it down into her tail there. So she has a real yellowish undertone here. We'll put some of that tone. Notice I just changed it a little bit. I just moved up here, changed it a little bit. That's okay. It's all going to look pretty much the same. See how it's just changing a little bit? We'll put some of this undertone right into her head here, right into this area, right up by the eye. Sometimes I leave a little white by the eye ring. That's the part that goes around the eye. Sometimes I leave that. But notice how very sketchy. I'm just looking for a tone here. Let's just go down the mantle here with this too. Let's put that on her. Just get some of that tone. This is her nice undertone that we have here. Now we'll come in and we'll find some shadow tone. Now sometimes, again, I'll change a little bit of the technique. I'm just going to darken this down with a little red, a little black. We'll find a nice shadowy tone here. Somewhere right around in here. That's kind of pretty. If you want it a little warmer, more orange or so, you can add a little more burnt sienna, which I'm going to want just a touch into that. She's pretty warm, so a little bit of burnt sienna into that will help keep her warm here. And that's pretty nice. And I'll look for where I'm going to be applying some of this, maybe on the tail covert here at the end of the tail here. Underneath the wing, we'll have some right in there, right up underneath there. That'll be a nice shadowy tone. And I'm just establishing some movement here. See, I'm just sliding the brush. That can establish some movement. And you'll want that sliding of the brush to kind of follow the contours of her body. Okay. Now, one of the things I do, though, is I make sure that some of that stays soft. So I'll slide my finger around because I don't want so much movement right now that it's going to interfere with the feathering that I'm going to decide to do. But I'll put a little bit of the shadow tone like right in here that's going to be on her cheek. We'll put some right in there. And, you know, you're following all different kinds of birds, but you'll have a little bit of shadow tone pulling this way. Now, notice I'm just going to pull this in like this. And my brush is actually moving smaller and shorter here because I'm up around the face and I'm using, even though these aren't the feathers, I'm still using some contouring strokes and the length of the stroke. So here they're shorter. Here you saw me just doing big long body strokes here. Okay. Here I'm doing shorter and I'll get a little longer following the contour of that, of her head here. We'll put some ideas of some of where the nap of of her neck there is, right over the mantle here. We'll streak some down. This will just give me some nice ideas, streaking, kind of curving, following her body shape. Some curves up like this. That'll work. Maybe a few strokes down like this. That'll have the contours of these feathers here. A little bit of this dark right up in here, up and around, which will be her beak. But see, I'll use just a corner of the brush and a quick little tap there because that's what's happening here. And just this starts the initial movement of it. Let's also use this dark tone here. And let's just establish with some of the dark, just the beginning of, here's a covert. Let's go a little darker, even like a burnt sienna here, and a little bit of black is nice here. Let's just try that. And these will establish, like here, these are the media coverts. These are her top coverts right here, her greater coverts here, or just the larger ones. And I'm just going to pull these down. I'll try to leave, she has little white tips on her wings, which you're going to see right into here. And the white tips on the coverts right there. So we're just going to establish a little dark right now, right in this area, pulling this down. And like I say, you can, go find yourself some nice photos and copy them as well. This will be the folded up tarsal feathers, or we just call them flight feathers. In the book, I'll just call them flight feathers for ease. And another set right down here. How real are you going to render that? You're going to do all the specific flight feathers, or are you going to just generally come in here and use the chisel of your brush like this to just suggest some of this dark here? The movement of the dark there. That's up to you. But the chisel, I love this little fusion because the chisel is not too perfect, but it gives you a lovely movement of color and a lovely feel of the bird there without giving too much, making it too perfect. Then we'll come down and we'll take some of that dark, which is a little bit darker than our shadow tone, and we'll just put in some of this, the movement of her tail feathers, and they kind of V down here at the end here. There's two sets here, a couple of sets, and some coverts that cover it here and the tail covert there, but we don't have to worry too much about that. But you might want to take some of that dark and just get a little bit of that body shadow in there, and a little bit of that dark into a few other areas. And notice the direction and the flat of the brush that I'm using, and I'm not feathering, but it's starting to look like feathers. And if I decide to add any of that up here, I'll use a smaller little touch of that. And again, follow the contours of the face coming around like that. And that just kind of sets her up there a little bit. So she's going to take some of this dark, because it also is going to go out here onto the tip of the beak. So I'll just use the chisel here, and I'll put a little bit of that out on the tip of the beak here. We'll get into some more beak detailing and stuff like that in just a little bit, but that'll set these basic shapes up. Now what I want to do is just take a few seconds here, and we'll talk about some of the other elements. So we just put in this shadow and this deep shadow in here, but we want to also start to consider some of the other elements of our painting. Okay, now in some of the lessons I do this first. I'll go in and set a vignette look to the painting. That is where the just like what I do here, which I love to just splash some color up and around up into here, and soften it up against the white. Vignette paintings sell very, very well for me, because they look like paintings rather than going to a solid background. And they're very, very popular in portrait painting. Okay, so if I'm an artist and I want to establish some looks, vignetted paintings are quite nice. To establish a vignetted painting, I'd come up here and I'd say, okay, let's step back just a bit more so you can see a little bit more. This is quite a large canvas, and I tend to paint on slightly oversized canvases like this because I'll leave some of this negative area out here back into white. Now, I'm one that is becoming more and more about using mat boards and everything, but I love some negative areas out there to breathe more life into my colors that are into my painting. And it's a very popular look right now. So I'm going to establish some of this other elements, the other areas out here. I'm going to take some extender over here, a tiny bit of my Phthalo Blue here, which is a very, very bright blue. I'll take a big old dollop of my white here, and I'll establish in here. Now this is going to be a bright, bright blue. The more white I add to it, it tends to tone it down a bit. It's kind of a blue-green, so sometimes into a painting I will want to change this a little bit with a tiny touch of violet, which takes it more towards an ultramarine blue type of sky. Sometimes I'll gray it down, tiny, tiny touch of a black into it, and that grays that right down, makes a beautiful gray to it. If you want to make a warmer gray to it, and which is perfect, and you might consider doing that, because an artist always looks for harmony. And one way to get harmony is to tie in a base color. So if I'm going to say here on this little chaffinch, I'm going to use a lot of burnt sienna into it, I might tie a little bit of that burnt sienna into the sky to help gray that down. And now I've got a burnt sienna that'll go very, very, a sky blue, that'll go very, very well with that little chaffinch, because they have the burnt sienna in common, and your eye will suddenly see that tonal harmony between the two. If I want a lot of contrast, let's say I'm painting for someone that likes a lot of pow, like my daughter Jessica, I might just leave that Phthalo Blue and white and leave that bang of that blue, okay? That's going to be different. And that's what makes you an artist, is that you know how to tie them together. Putting a little burnt sienna in there is going to tie them together. Putting a little bit of a pow or some of this other color, and we might just put a little pow right up here of some of this other color right up here like this. Work this around and work this vignette out like this in many different ways like this. How much you do, that's up to you. Okay, that's up to you. I'll work right up close to the bird here. We'll put this sky color out here. Now, I like to do this and leave this out here, especially when I'm this far out in the painting. I like to leave these strokes out here And, you know, this bird just kind of takes over here now into the painting here. I can also do this. I can also, if I don't want it quite powerful out there like that, I can hit it with the paper towel, pull the towel in some different directions like that to get some other movement like this out into the painting. And that's a lovely effect. As I come over here to the other side, I might want to soften this out. And again, you can hit it with the paper towel. Sometimes I'll just pick up a big dollop of white and hit it out here with white if I want to get a lot of movement of paint out here like this, or establish a big old cloud like I do out here with the eastern bluebird. I put a big old cloud out here. I start building a cloud, and you can build it with the knife or build it with any of the brush, the big brush like that. So there's a number of ways. Or if you want everything softened out, you can just drop in your towel like this and just put some of that in there like that. Now, generally in the lessons, I'll come right up into the bird here like that, into the lessons with this initial going of putting on the color here like this, and that establishes it. But this color that I'm applying here right now, going around, sometimes I'll put it like this and use my finger and just soften her right up into that, because I don't know if the back of her head here is going to be a lost edge or if it's going to be a found edge. I haven't really decided that in my plan. I pretty much am going to bring her head out, but how much am I going to do? I don't know yet. So that might be a lost or a found edge. So you may come in here to the back and just run your finger right here and just blur that out slightly, because you may need that blurriness later on. And if you get it too sharp, it's you can still go back and fix it at any time. It's just easier. I like to liken this to, and I wrote that in the book in a couple of the lessons. I like to liken it to how I paint is like looking through the lens of a camera, and we're going to start out really blurry, unfocused, and then slowly turn the focus lens on that camera and focus things in. So if you're at all in doubt, unfocus. Don't leave everything too much in focus, because you can always add that focus as we turn that lens, and that keeps everything just kind of soft here, okay? If you're like me, I like to have a little bit of the grassy look and leaf look to the painting. I really want to get, color out here is just very weak and stuff, but right in here is where I want to establish into my painting a lot of color, okay? And this is hard for a lot of painters, especially painters who are raised up into the decorative arts, is we tend to paint too thin because of our thin acrylics that we use. Artists know that the interest comes from color. We're artists. We paint with color to give interest. So we need a lot of color when we go to do a painting. So I'm going to take some pine green down here. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to that for some contrast. Right, a nice cooler little color here. I may tone that down with just a touch of burnt sienna also here, and you should see that. I'm just working right here, pine green, a little bit of blue, and some burnt sienna right on my big brush. And I may slide a little bit of that blue and stuff right into that, right in here. And I may drop some of this color right in here, just this greenish color right in here. I may make a different yellow, different green here. Let's take a little yellow and a little bit of black here. And I'll just drop some of that in as well. Right in here, I want to go right up against this bird. And I want these edges here to be kind of soft, but lots of color into here. Now that's really going to lift her right up. And we'll kind of model this off. Drop this up in through here, leave a little bit of that sky. And see, I'll work my brush like this in all kinds of ways to get these colors out there like that. Really vignette it up. And this is how I love to paint here. We'll drop a little lighter blue into that. Just drop this out here like this. Just grab some of this movement. Grab a little bit of that blue there. As I get further out, sometimes I just pick up a big old dollop of white and just run this right into white, because my background of my canvas here is going to be white. So I'll just run that in like that. Grab some yellows. Move some of this color in here. Now you see this color really modeling and movement in through here. That's what I want this color to have. All this movement. And we might take that away from right around that area there, just a bit of her face. We're going to go back and paint that again, but what I don't want you to do is be so stiff into your painting. I want you to come in here and just move these colors around. Let's grab some of these bluish colors here. Move these around, drop this into here. This will all come around. Drop this around. I love to use my fingers like this. You can do it with these paints. They're completely, totally non-toxic. There's nothing in them that are going to hurt you, so they're great, great things to use. Don't cut this right in half like this. So if you do on one side, make sure you take a little bit of this up here, model that around a bit, right up in there. We'll get some of that nice movement in here for the other elements that we want to establish. And maybe I want some little red blossoms or something like that in here, red and white and pink blossoms. They'll have some of the orangey color from her on it maybe. We'll put a little red, a little burnt sienna. We'll establish like, okay, here's going to be some reddish type blossoms here, not too close to the face there. We'll just establish some color movement here, where some of these things are going to be. We'll soften that, take that a little thinner, maybe even add a little bit of the sky color to it as we come right back here to work some of these back up into this area. Maybe there's some blossoms back up into the top back here. So I'm establishing some of these other colors and ideas. Maybe a little red violet into that, a little burnt sienna. We'll keep that burnt sienna running as a nice harmony. We'll add some other color in here. This is just a look. This is just to get some colors in here. I like that color. Maybe we'll drop that right up to contrast her right in there. So there's one sitting right back behind her. But see, that's going to leave an area, open area there that's going to go right up against her face, which will bring that contrast there and there, which will work great. And then we'll just kind of move these out here. And I'll just grab this and just soften this out here for right now. Grab some of this around. And sometimes I like to soften all of this into a lot of white and blue. And notice I'm just pinch wiping my brush as I change here. A lot of white and blue, and soften some of these colors and grays out there. And I just pinch wipe that color off, and you can come through like this and pick through. You can even use your paper towel with the blue. I'll do that sometimes and drop that in and model that around and move those colors in and around, keeping those edges really blurry right now. These are the lost edges, keeping those edges really blurry because you're not real sure what you're going to do with everything. Your plan is saying that these edges are going to be really soft out here, but you're not sure of the shapes yet, and you have to kind of paint her a little bit till you get those shapes in there or stuff like that. So this gives you an idea here. We might want to, before we leave here, sometimes I do it now, sometimes I've already done it, sometimes I do it later, establish some of the little ideas of some stems that she would be standing on right out here like that. Little browns and reds and yellows, soften the edges of them here, vignette those out, let some of those stand in here so that she has just some little ideas of stems and stuff here, movements of some of those through there like that. That will help establish movement in our painting. So we'll just put those in very soft and edgy like that, just very painterly, okay? So now we've established in here some of the other elements. Now we'll go back, return to our bird here, and establish some of the first movements of the feathers. Okay, now we're going to establish those movements, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go back to my flat brush. This is a number 6. You can use a 4 or a number 6, depending on the size of the bird. Let's go to a number 4 here. And we'll come in now onto the bird here, okay? And I'm going to start working my colors here onto my palette. I'll just go ahead and set this. This will hurt my blue a little bit, but I'm going to restate everything again anyway. So it's that's just the ideas there to help me do this. And we'll start working in here, on her and some of the movement, not the actual feathers, but some of the movement for the feathers, okay? So first we have some of the undertone here. I will start some of the movements by grabbing, we have our yellow over here, and she has a real light kind of tan color to her also. So I'm going to take some of my toned color here, which is my black and my red and some burnt sienna, right down into my yellows here, and a little bit of that Hansa. That's a nice color right there. I'll start to add a little bit of white to that right over here. Make the lighter version not a highlight, but just a lighter version, kind of a tan kind of color that she is here. And we'll come in and we're going to start some of the movement. Now, let's start out to here, right in the nape of her neck, where it's going to go right over the mantle here. And I'll just pull down this way with kind of a medium stroke. That's going to put in some of the light here and establish a little bit of that contour movement to that feathering there. If you want to do some general movement, let's say restate some of that area right in there. Take a little bit of yellow and a little bit of the brown. You can just move like this, and you can see you can come back in and almost get the look of feathers. But more than anything else, you're establishing the movement. So let's take some of that light. Let's go back here, pick up some of that light. We'll come right in here. I want these cheekbone kind of feathers coming this way. And so this will establish some of that movement. I'll leave a little bit of light ring around her face there like that. I can touch in a little bit of dark or that medium tone and pull back the other way here. And that will soften some of that movement. I will, down into here, I'll soften movement with my finger a lot. But up in here in the small area, sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes you can reach up there. But let's take a little bit of that and our contour is going to go like this, like this, like this, and down like this. So I'll angle this and slowly come around. This builds her body up a little bit more, builds her colors to her feathers a little bit more, and establishes a little more movement. So sometimes I'll do that and then pick up a little slightly different yellow. And notice I model these yellows in my brush. I don't mix it. I just touch them into it, model it. And I want these tones. You don't want to copy the same tone overs again. So here I put a little bit, kind of a greenish little color into that. But I want to model this. Don't copy the tones. That's what bottled acrylics did to us. Everyone thinks they have to have the same color because we squirt it all out. And I think that's sad. I don't. I like that. I just get a yellowish tone in here and we'll change it several times. So now I've got a little bit of the work of the tone there. We'll grab a little more light, which is going to go underneath her neck here, and pull that down, and that'll get that movement there. So you see, I'm without doing too many feathery looks here, I'm getting the movement that she is going to have into her feathers here. We'll take some of this lighter yellow. We'll come right down here. We'll establish right the point of her breast here, right down into this area. I got it right into that green. I'm going to push it back just a bit. I'll go back and forth. Sometimes in the steps you'll see me take green like this, right into her like this, and then push the yellow back out again like that. That not only gives me a different tone, helps her harmonize with her background, but it allows little bits of green to go in and out of there, and it'll make her feathers look softer against that edge, which really works nice. I'll continue a little longer strokes down her body here and move this in through here. Now, if some of yours see my color's still wet right in through here. And for some of you, as you know, one of the habits that you have, and I know this because I did it for a long time, is that you think everything that you're painting at each stage has to be perfect. I'm not even thinking anything perfect right now. I'm just putting color on. But if you're thinking that and you're painting to copy something, what happens is you play and you play and you play, and then your colors dry as you play. That's going to happen. That's a natural part of learning how to paint because we all copy to learn. So that's fine. But if that happens to you and you want to do some softening here, don't forget, if I'm putting this color down right here and I'm pushing this, I can use my finger right in here and soften this because my dark is still wet. But if it isn't, if that dark is not wet, put this down like this tone down in here, then just reach up and grab a dark tone. It does not have to be the same dark tone. Push that in like that, and you'll get that softness back, and you can work your finger in and out of there to get that softer tone to that, okay? But always work into the wet tones back and forth. So if you're in an area and that tone is dry, just put it on, then go back and hit it with the darker tone or shadow tone, and then work the two together, okay? You don't have to worry about pulling holes or anything like this like we did with earlier generation acrylics. These won't pull holes anymore. That has all been worked out and is gone. So you can just paint and paint and paint and paint and work your tones. So I'll work those in there just like that. Okay, and that works really, really nice here. Okay, so I'm giving some of these nice feather movements that I had into here. As I come into here, the ideas of some of these areas here. Now, she has white tips to her coverts and to the other feathers. I show you quite a few ways to do that. In the painting here, you can use your liner brush, of course, and put them on. You could use your round brush and put them on, put on the edge with the round brush. That's pretty easy. A lot of times I'll take a little corner of the brush like this, and I'll come right up into here like this. Now what that corner is, I'll lead this feather with that corner like that, and I'll just put on this way, and then I'll put on another stroke up here, and that'll start to look just like feathers. I'm just reloading the corner of that brush, using the brush on its chisel like this, and this is the beauty of this little fusion, and pulling that up and pulling that up there right there. So now you get the look of those little coverts like that, the light little edges to the coverts. Sometimes I'll put on the edges of the flight feathers here with the white as well. Now, if you push the white where the white is on the leading edge, you don't have as much control. But if you turn the brush like this, angle it just a little bit, pick up just a corner here, angle it a little bit so you can see where that edge is like that. And you can use the edge of this, just the chisel of that, to put on some nice detail to some of those primary and secondary feathers here. Just a little bit of detail in there, a little bit of movement. So sometimes I'll do that with the edge of the filbert, or the edge of the flat. Sometimes I'll do that with the liner brush. Sometimes I do that with the number 4. All of it is okay, and all of it will give you a different look. And I'll come back and do some more of this, here in just a little bit, probably with the liner brush. So, it's just giving you some different looks to it. And that's all you want. And I don't want to be too perfect right now, but that's what I want to have. We have a little bit more of some of the medial coverts here. We can just give that and let these run right up in here into the mantle here, the mantle area. So a little bit of light coming right here. We'll let this kind of, because I don't want to get anatomically correct too much on her. I want her to be more casual. So I'm just going to create some movement here for that. Maybe just a bit more white. I love this white little tipping that comes right in this area on her. So I just want to get some white or light color movement like this. I don't want a feather. I just want to pull down and get some of that movement that's down like that she always has right there on those scapulars, and here they're pulling down. So here's the mantle and it's pulling down. Gently, I call this whole thing the mantle, but these pull down this way. You see that? And so she has that kind of feeling there. So I'll impart just a little bit of that movement of the pulling down there. I like to do that. Okay, so you're going to have areas of the light part of the neck in here, and you can just grab that movement. Now when I grab this brush, you can really see the movement a little bit lighter, a little bit more movement down here. Okay, you can have a little bit of light. She will, and it all depends, I mean, it's dangerous to be out this far and give those light tips that this little female chaffinch has to this tail out here, because that's pulling way out away from your center of interest. So you might want to just run it with your finger like that and soften that out, okay? But that's basically how I go about doing that up, okay? So we have the feather movement. That's what we're adding right now, this feather movement. Now we'll go in and we'll take a look at some large area feathers, okay? For the large area feathers, I'm just going to keep continuing on here. What I'm going to do is just use my number 4. Let's do some large area. First, we'll, some of the large area can really be over the whole body. A lot of times I think of the large area all down and through here because I'll put it on and leave it. But large area feathers can also be established, really right along with the feather movement. So first I'm thinking feather movement here, then I'm thinking large areas of feathers, and then I go in and make detail bits of feathers, okay? So in other words, when you look at her, that's right, is here, you can have a large area of feathers. You have the feather movements going here, then a large area of feathers, and then the little deep, 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 like that actually makes the feather. Okay, so it's kind of like breaking your thought process down in here. So I can really kind of create some large areas, kind of yellowy, kind of feathers right up and through here as well, just like this with the flat of the brush. Don't stroke too many times because you'll blend it too much. Then I'll soften this movement out here like this with my finger, and you will already start to create, do you see that? Start to create some large areas or large movements there of those feathers, okay? And so I'll take some of this light that's right down through here. Let's go down to the nape part of her neck here. Now, when you feather, you can pull in like this, which will leave a light little tip. So let's say I'm doing a covert or something like that that's light. And I may leave the nape of the neck here like that with a light feather right there at the edge like that, large area. But sometimes that's a little bit too much, so what I'll do is I'll just blend that or push that right with my finger, and that softens it out. What I'm looking for more than anything else is the movement. So sometimes I'll just, if it's just movement, I'll just use this brush with that stiff paint. You want stiff paint. This is why this white is so thick. I want this stiff paint so I can just establish some of this movement here. Okay, and it's going to start that little fracturing and high and low of the color that'll give it that look of the feathers there. Okay, now sometimes these large other area feathers, like up here on her cheekbones and stuff, actually go a little bit darker. Okay, so we'll just kind of suggest some of those dark areas there like this, pulling back like this towards your head here. Okay, that's not the individual feathers. We're just putting in the large area there of her feathers. We'll take some of that dark that comes right up here by her shoulder blades, and we'll push some of this. Now, I love to run the two together like that and then just soften it with my finger. Okay, and different surfaces. This is one of the things that's going to give you all kinds of different surfaces. Here I'm using a canvas board that's a pretty fine weave of a canvas board. I love to paint the birds on the wood panels because that's going to give me a different look. I won't get that high and low of the canvas, especially on the detailing of the feathers. So that's got to be one of your things in your plan that I probably should have mentioned, is that, the surface that you're going to do. If you're going to do a lot of detailing on something, you might want to consider doing it on a smoother panel than you are, on a canvas, which is not going to allow you to do a lot of smooth work onto it here. So that's part of your consideration. But I want to go back in and restate just a little bit of this movement down through here, and just hit it with my finger a little bit. And so that's kind of like what I consider a large area of feather movement there. We'll come back up in through here and maybe restate our shadows underneath here and pull down. And I pull down and it scrapes it off the top of that surface of that canvas. So that you have to be aware of that might happen. And we'll take a little burnt sienna and black, that nice shadowy tone, making a slightly different tone. You don't want the same tone we used earlier. We want a different tone. Paint for difference. Don't paint for same. Okay? So we'll come in, we'll establish a little bit of that. That's a little much here. Take a little bit of a little more burnt sienna here. A little more Hansa here. Nice medium-sized tone. Just take some of that out. Move that through. So the movement of my brush here is doing the large areas of the feathers. So I'll just kind of pull down through here larger strokes. And when I do these large areas of feathers, then I just start with that nice thick paint. I push it through. So I love to do this on that little tree sparrow lesson. It's just wonderful. I'll take and I'll put some yellows, maybe a little burnt sienna in like this, and I'll strike the colors like this. And then I'll just use my finger to move those together, just ever so softly. So I get that feather movement. And as I do this, sometimes 4, 5, 6 times here, I will start to get the feeling of the large area feathers. Sometimes I'll stop and just use the brush when you get that nice thick paint on there. See, every little touch starts to make it look like feathers. And I've got to watch. I don't try to finish this area until I finish her face. But I want to get just this look of little feathers out like that. And sometimes I'll do it in reverse. I'll pick up the dark here like this, a little different tone here. And I'll pick up like this, to get some yellowy tones in there, to get some other tones back and forth in there, just to get that tone movement. If it gets too much, I just push my finger. But it's that nice thick paint in there, sliding back and forth. We'll slide over the edge of our little greens there. Look at that feathery edge you can create. The look of that. And it's that thick paint now sliding, and it holds its own, gives you a beautiful look of these nice feathers in that area there. So without having a tremendous amount of detail, okay? Not having a tremendous amount of detail to that, okay? So now one of the other things we got to do is we got to worry about flowing our feathers and stuff to our form. We'll start doing that and doing some detail work. Okay, now we're continuing on, and we've got some of that initial large area kind of established here. We're now going to go into some of the feathering, and at this part of the section of it, I'm going to show you some of the different feathering techniques up close that I use to impart the details on it. Some birds I will use different, mix them all up. Okay, in some of the lessons, I've already added the eye ring, and the detail around there. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways in which to do it. Sometimes I feel like I need to add that eye and those details right away so the bird starts to talk to me, or I set that contrast right there. But I have a real clear vision about where I'm going with my plan here. So I'm just going to continue on, and then we'll go in and I'll add the eye and the beak and stuff like that into the detail section of it, okay? Really, that I do want to say to you is I really like to add that eye and some of those beak details and everything all at the same time, and work the entire design and work the design and work the design. That's my favorite way to paint. So when you consider that when you're starting yours, okay? But we're going to continue on here with some of the feathering here. I'm going to want to start to get large other area feathers, make sure I get some of those out of the way and get some of those established with the lighter color here. So here's this kind of a beige color, which is my burnt sienna, maybe a touch of the black there, some yellow and some white, and I'm going to restate some of this light, very thick light, right up here underneath into her neck, and drag some of this down, pull some of this across into this area here. And so that gives me a nice light area that's going to be down here on her face, and it's not white. It's always a good idea here too, because I to set out a little white, so you see, the white up against that, so you see it is not a white. I'm quite a bit down from white. I'm down to about a value 7 or so. So I'll leave me white for later if I need that here. But I'm going to come down the body. She has little spots of light color down her body here that I want to give just a kind of little idea of that. Just little, and follow the contours of her body here. So I like little strikes like this that just kind of break up that, follow kind of the contour here, move generally down through here, larger strokes, and then you can soften some of that look with your finger or with a large brush, following the contour there. So that looks pretty nice. I want to have a few strikes of the light like this here into that, since her body gets a little bit light there. That's a wrong position there. We'll restate, before I get into too much of the feathers here, I'm going to restate just a little bit of light into these coverts here, the edges of these here. I'm just going to drop in some of that nice movement back into there. Then we'll get into the detailing here as we get going. So I feel I've got a pretty good handle on this area and pretty good handle on the overside. So I'm going to switch now to my number 4, which I do love to do a lot of feathering of the birds with my number 4. I'm going to go back and work feathers. I work feathers with like this number 4 back and forth between the values. So I'm going to start out here, since I was just using a lot of dark value, with some Hansa Yellow. I just toned it down with a touch of black, a touch of burnt sienna right up here. I'm not worried about making exactly the same tone as I had earlier. I just want another kind of tone of a tan color. Then I'm going to come in here and pull some of the feathers this way. I'm just going to pull it with my brush and actually physically make some small strokes like this into there. Now, I'm not a big fan of taking a liner brush and going out and making feathers like that, because that just looks like what you did, a whole bunch of small liner strokes. And when you're doing a painting, some of these smaller strokes come together and they just give you like a feeling of an area. And that's what I want to do, is just take that and just gently push that together like that, push that movement together, and you get this lovely softer movement of the feathers there. So I want to have some of this general, just soft. And sometimes I use just the tip of the brush when I do this, especially as I come up and around the head here. I will slowly turn my brush around like this as I add some of this other tone. See, it's just slightly different tone. It's beautiful tone. And I'll slowly use more of the point of the brush here as I come in around this beak area here like that. Okay, so I'm putting that in there. And then I will, let's revisit some darker color here, darker tone right up through here. Now pull down, and see I pull down, and see that little wispy edge that I get, that just comes from lifting the brush off, and it's the hair on this super soft fusion brush. That's what's giving it, and I'm not pressing hardly anything at all. And I'll put some this way, and that's just the hair of the fusion that's giving you that look. And see, it's not the look of a liner brush. That's the beautiful thing of it. It's a feathering look to it. And we'll come down here and we'll push some this way. Now sometimes I will push this way and leave it that way as well. And sometimes I'll wipe my brush. Let's just take a little bit of a lighter color here, and I'll pull back this way into that so that I leave a little bit of the that's a little too light. I just stroke right through it, and so I get this variation. This is where I like that undulation of the feathers up and down like that, so you get that beautiful little look of the feathers there, and that nice tone there like that. That's really nice. The highs and lows here as this little neck, the nape of the neck there's riding over the mantle back here, the feathers. And I'll push those together, or I'll use some of the yellow and stroke back through that. And I'll say this several times in the book, when you'll see me feathering, I'll work back and forth several times like that as I'm putting some of those feathers in there. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit more white, tap a little bit of the toned yellow in that, and we'll come in here and just add a little bit more movement right in there, a little more of that white right in there. That overall light, but see this shorter, use the point and some of that texture in there. That works nice. Maybe grab some of this other tan stuff and just add a few little short movements of that in there. Again, see, that just breaks that all up. And all those movements and all that working that we're doing is bringing it all together. I want to bring this part of her head and this neck area together with kind of a medium yellow tone. Drop some of that in there. And I will just pick up a little bit darker here and just drop some of that in there. Break that up. That little number 4 works really well as long as you kind of figure that your feathering areas there on her. Okay. And let's get just a few little bit lighter tan colors in here. Okay. And so I can put some of these in like this, following up and around. You can see I get even more and more and more detail to the feathers. Sometimes I will overstate it, like I'm just kind of overstating that just a bit. Then I come back, tap into a darker, little bit darker tone, and then come back in and set that in. That's a little yellow for me, so I'll just set a few of those in. Then I'll come back with a darker tone and hit them again, like that. And you can see I get even more detail. Now, how much work you put into your feathers, that's up to you, but you can see you can get some very nice individual feathering looks there, to your birds. How much you do, though, is up to you. It's a judgment call. Here, I'm going to take a little darker tone. Let's come right up against this dark here, which is what she has against some of that, and we'll pull down. And if I want, I can just revisit a little lighter tone right in there and just pull that down right over and reload, pull that down right over like that, And that's what gives you that little blurry feather over that darker tone. So you can get some darker toned areas like that. Okay. And again, I would work these quite a bit around the facial area. So I would come back in here now and use the point of this and establish some dark and light taps just with the tip of the brush in and around where this beak is going to be, right up in here. Smaller movements up like that. And then also tap in some yellow white into that area. Just some small little stuff. And tap this in. But I never like stop with the light. Sometimes I'll put the dark back in my brush and go back and state that again. Tapping a little bit, working them back and forth till I get interest into an area that I think that should have there. Okay, so I'll do that a lot with the number 4. Now as you start out into some of the other areas, of course you're going to get bigger areas here with this. You might want to use this little number 4 and some of your darker, some sienna color, some burnt sienna and some black colors here, and you can go right up into and help and edge into and feather the edges of these coverts here to kind of make them look like they have a little bit more of a feathered edge here, like this. Okay. One of the things that I love to do, and I do it on the willow flycatcher, is to do what I call negative painting. Okay, and I'll show you here what that is. You can do it with a flat, or you can do it with the round like this, and I slightly flattened the round, and I'll pull down like this, the negative painting, painting out the light. So that light that I put on earlier is still wet here, but I'm pulling it right down. You can see it blend just a touch. I don't want it to blend too much, but I'll pull down right to the negative painting like that to leave just what I want. Negative painting is you're painting out. So you're painting out what you want. So I'll leave just the tips of those little coverts there like that. And up on the top up here with these, I'll have a little bit more brown, maybe a little bit more yellow into this color here. And we'll pull down just a bit and leave some of the little light tips to that, just like that I want. And I can soften some of those with my finger or go back and forth till I leave just the amount of light movement that I want. I might want to have some, depending on how much detailing you're going to do, like on the little willow flycatcher, I may come back and reset some of the movement to these covert feathers like this. We might come in and reset some of the dark movement right into here to this one right in here like this. And then come back and let's restate some of the lights here, just so you can see how you can do this several times. The more times you do it, the more interest it gets. But of course it takes you longer to paint, so it's kind of like how much you're going to do. And there I have the tan. I might want to add a little area of white in there too, so it's a little, so you get some mottled interest right in there like that. Okay, just kind of tap that along and take that up. Okay, sometimes I will drag it up a bit, and I do a lot of negative painting with the dark, because the dark covers a light really easy. So I'll show you that in just a second. So now I come in and I'll tap this. That's a little too even for me, so let's just tap a little bit of that dark right in there. The light right on the edge. Now, I come back, I'll pick up the darker color I want to use for the negative part of the feather here, and I'll come down and I'll pull down and lift off right before the edge. Tap into some more color, pull down and lift off right before the edge. Here, pull down and lift off right before the edge, and that gives you your nice light little variations and tips and stuff to the feathers. Now that's getting a little dark, so I'm going to put a little burnt sienna in there too. And you can run colors back and forth here. You don't want to stroke too many times with that dark because you'll drag the light up. But you can also come in and sometimes I'll edge a brush like this and use the little edge of the brush and pull up and in to establish that movement here. How much you do is detail, and that's up to you. How much you're going to put into the, into the little feathers that you have. If you want more of the, like on the goldfinch and stuff, they have more of a white band look to it. So, you know, you'll band some of this a little bit whiter like that, and then tap into your dark like this and pull right down into it and lift off. You just don't want to lift off at a solid band. Just lift off a little bit there, and see, that puts the band on there, but it also gives you this little undulated edge here like this that just makes the feathers look so nice. Makes them look more like real feathers here. So let's put a little band right up onto this covert here, right up into that one there, and right up into this one here. We'll just get a little bit of that going in there. I'll take some of that out with a little bit of my tan color here, just like that. So you can see, you can get all kinds of beautiful looks to the feathers here, and these little brushes do a great job. And you can even paint dark in like this and negative paint from this side up into that little covert feather like that to get more contrast up there if that's what you want. So the negative painting, I do a lot of negative painting when I want a bird to look more real. You know, feather-wise, I want it to look more real. I do the negative painting with a small flat sometimes if I want to give a little bit of a realism to it, but also have it different. I vary these techniques a lot. There's not just one technique I use all the time to paint my birds. I make them all different, and that's what gives different feelings to the birds. I make them look all different. Okay, so by using and mixing up and using all kinds of techniques. So we'll do that right there. So that gives a pretty good look to that one. And I'm going to let the flight feathers be a little softer here. So I'm just going to give a general little movement here to the flight feathers. One of the things I love to do, and you'll see me do it on several things, is I'll take the dark and I'll slide the edge of this brush right along the edge like that, and pick up this little beaded edge of white that I will roll down like this, and let that become the edge of that feather here, the front edge of that wing, of that big feather there. And then from there I can negative paint some of that out till I have that nice little lit edge there. And how much I took out a little bit too much there. I want a little bit more. So I'll just restroke the white again. And sometimes I'll roll that brush a little bit so I get a little variation to it as I put those on. Let's put these other little lighter edges of this covert on here as well. Then I'll just negative paint some of that back, just a bit, with the dark. So isn't that negative paint kind of fun? There like that. So that gives a nice look to my little coverts on her like that. Hey, how much you put on? Again, it's up to you. And I'll drop some of this back here. I'm going to let some of this of her back just kind of soften out. I'll let that movement stand right in there. Okay. She has a lot of a dark little feathering detail. So now as I start to come in, I can pick up a little bit, darker tone here, and feather up a little bit of some of the dark tones through her, darker movements through her. And this will just be small movements of color with just the tip of the brush here. And I can just tap those lightly to soften them out. Or if I get too many, if you get too many, I'll show you here. If you get too many, just take a medium tone or lighter tone and just go right back through those again, just like that, okay? So as you get into this brush, a lot of times I will use it for small feather details, a lot of negative painting and stuff like that as I go through and work these feathers. So I'll use the feathers pulling down. Sometimes I pull the feathers up, but a lot of times I like to do this. I'll start a feather and I'll pull down and I'll lift that feather off real quick, and I'll get that draggy edge to that feather like that. And I like that look to that feather that's happening right there like that. And you can adjust some of it back the other way with a little darker color. That's not quite dark enough. So I'll take that tone, and again, change the tone. Don't look for the same color. Change the tone. That's what makes everything beautiful. See how many times I'm just changing this? And the whole thing here is becoming really nice. She's working and becoming very nice. And how much you're going to feather, that's up to you. You can come in here and add a little bit more feather movement, large area feather movement. just here you could, grab a little, it's a little too much reddish there, so we'll get a little more yellow into that. Just take a little bit of that out. But see, I don't wipe it out. You don't need to. And just grab a little bit of feathery movement in there. How much is up to you, and how much time you're going to spend on your little bird feathering her up there. You can do that. Now, so that gives you an idea of doing some of the feathering techniques. I pull down, I'll do negative painting, I'll use the tip, and I'll even go into the liner brush. I'll do that, some of that, when we hit into details. Okay, let's go take a look at details. Now we'll head into the details, okay, and continuing on with her right here. Like I say again, many times I have the beak and on almost all lessons I have the beak in by now and the dark. You don't have to, you can just work on feathering. I'm going to go right into some black here with my small quill, and I'm just going to tap in the eye. Now on her, it's, some birds, they appear very round, and some birds a little bit more towards the oval shape. She's just a little bit more oval, a little longer in the back and the front, just a little bit more of an oval shape there. So we'll drop that black into that. Sometimes I make a low shine. We can even take some blue, some wet blue color here, or gray color, from earlier here in the sky, which is still wet here on my painting, and drop a little bit of that in there as a low shine. If you get too much, just tap it out with the tip of your brush and some black. I will take and put a little shine. Now, she'll have a nice little shine here. Take a little white right on the tip. She'll have a little shine right up here at about 1 o'clock or so on the eye there, which will be nice. And again, if you get it too big, just take a little black on your brush and push it out like that. Okay. She'll have the eye ring, which we're going to start the eye ring in. I'm going to reach right over here, grab some of my tanned color, and lighten that up. When I use a quill, I like the color to be a little bit juicier, so I'll add a little bit of extender to it. And we'll just lighten it, leave that black in there, just graze that up. Makes kind of a lighter kind of gray color here. And we'll kind of tap that right around her eye, clean up some of that around her eye here. Now you want to keep that eye ring pretty much circling the eye. If you flatten it out on top, she's going to start looking angry, and you don't want her to do that. Okay, so let's pick up a little more white, of the pure white, and a little bit of Hansa Yellow into that. So she gets to be a real bright kind of yellowy tan color. And we'll just tap into highlights. Now sometimes on these eye rings, I put them in pretty light with just white, and sometimes I'll drop them down just a bit, but we want some of that movement around there, and a little bit of that movement out from the eye ring, a little bit of feathering details around here. And you'll be careful up and around her eye like this, because this is the area of interest on her. Okay, some of the birds, I take a darker tan color here, okay, darker tan color, and I suggest the movement of the edge of the eye ring like this, and some of it pulling down like that, so, and back up in there like that. So that just creates another secondary look to the eye right in there. She usually has a corner of the eye that pulls back. A lot of the birds do have a corner of the eye that pulls back, and may even go all the way back like that you can do a little, light feathering up against, and shadow some of that back there like that. That's just movement that you're going to try to capture. So, I'll capture it with a shadow, capture it with the light here. And I ended up taking out a little too much of that movement, but they pull back. Some of them have a definite, line coming back from the eye. She doesn't have that much of a definite one. But we'll take some of that light color here, and we'll stipple now. Little short, downy type feathers up and around her face here. That movement up there. And again, like everything, I work it a couple times. So I'll take my yellower ones here and set that in there too. My yellow and my burnt sienna back into that. Just looking for some of that nice movement around the eye here. But she does have quite a few of them. And so when you're getting into details like this, you spend your time. Slow down, take your time. This is the area of interest on her, so we want this face to really pull the interest of the painting. So then we'll come in and we'll just liner a few feathers right in here. Now on the canvas, it's difficult to get liner detail on because you'll hit the high and low of the canvas. But we'll add just a few little tips of this. And sometimes I do this just with my number 4. Sometimes I add a lot of little detail like this, which really gives her a nice, area of interest right on her feathers right up there like that, okay? So now what I'll do is I'll come in with some of the details. Let's go back to our 4. We're going to work a soft kind of sienna kind of gray. So it's a reddish gray color. This is her beak color here, okay? And we might even have a little bit of red into that. And we'll drop that in right up onto the shadow here. Now some of the beaks I spend a lot of time. I'll render that beak back and forth several times and feathering back on with her. And I would on her as well. I would do this, and we'll tap into medium color. We'll work a light color into here. We'll work a light color into this top, and you see I just worked the tip of this little number 4. I love to paint this with a 4. I'll tap some light right in there like that. Take some of it off your brush and stroke some of that through. That'll put that movement into the beak. You'll look for other tones, like maybe there's a little bit of a brighter orange tone than there generally is. In the beak somewhere right in there. We'll put a little tone of that, maybe slightly more red onto that one there. Here. We'll look for some other lights, highlights. Other lights to come back through again, right up in there like that. Streak that, pull that up through. So you get a lot of coloring and stuff there onto the beak. You can restate some of your darks out on the tip of the beak, pull in. That'll just gently put that, watch for that shadow line in the beak there. So I end up painting some of these beaks back and forth several times. That's how you're going to get this lovely color movement into them. This softening, this color movement, and painting them back and forth several times here. Small. Use just the tip of the brush. Paint that. I got a little extra color there, so I just had to lift that off. But just small. Use these very, very small and set that in like that. Okay? Till you find some of that nice, you can round some down. You can make the beak look round by rounding the shadow in here. The beak is an important part of her, so, it's just like doing the mouth, making the smile on when you're painting people. You need to find that nice interest here. I'm just putting some more orangey color in. Just going to lighten that area right in there a bit. I'll paint it into position with a little more dark. So now you see I've painted this several times back and forth. Even though I liked it, I'm still doing it again to get the color movement and stuff to it that I want to have. And I'll just establish a little bit of a shine there onto the beak. And I might take my liner brush with some final little light hairs here. Set those kind of right up over some of that shadowing. Right down in some of this area here that just kind of incorporates the beak there into her face there. So we'll do a final little couple of touches and final little couple of shines and stuff. And that'll put that on. Put that on her. Let's put just a little more touch of orange in there. Just a little difference right in there. So you see, you get all that lovely difference there into your beak, into her beak. Make sure she has that nice beak division line there, if you want. How much you do is up to you. You know, you can continue on, do more little detail feathers on there if you want, but that'll give you that a good idea. Those are some of the feathering techniques that I use throughout the book. You'll see quite a few of them. Now what I'll do is I'll just take the remaining part of this DVD and I'll blast on some flowers here for you and show you some of the other accent areas and some of the quick painting techniques I use. Okay, so let's go do that. You ready? Okay, now, so we have that details there onto her beak. Now you're going to come back, you may come back and revisit all of those areas again. And I do that several times in the book because I'm one that believes that you finish the painting with the bird, okay? You don't finish it with these flowers out here. After you put these flowers on, you go back and you revisit your bird again, looking for some contrast and some highlights. Okay, so one of the things that I'll do, and you'll see me do it several times in several lessons, is that I'm going to come in here, and what's going to make her pop forward here in this painting is to make sure that I have a good coating of nice solid color in here. And you may think it looks opaque, but it never hurts to go back and do it again. So I'm going to use a small flat here. I'm going to go right into, let's just set some of my color here, okay? I'm going to go right into some of my blues and my sky color that I used here. And I'm going to be kind of careful right up against the edge of her here. And I'm going to use this to really push her. And you can negative paint if you got a little something out of proportion there. But look how even having that thicker color in there. Let me zoom in just a touch here. Let me zoom in, guys. There we go. See how that's really starting to pop her a little bit more forward. And I'll come in right in here on the edge of that beak. There's nothing. And look at how that whole top part of her there just really comes forward here. And I got a little bit of burnt sienna in that this time. And that is just really causing that nice harmony there. I'll clean up that beak. Drop this right on down here like this. We'll work it into some of those greens that are still wet. See, I'm talking about the heritage paint here now, so I've been painting on this thing for a long time as we filmed the segments of this, and that greens and stuff here are still just nice and wet because I put a lot of them in there and my colors are properly prepared, okay? So we get some people that say, oh, you know, what's going on? I don't like this. I can't get these. They work. All you have to do is prepare them properly, and they will work for you, okay? Take some care with it. Take care of your palettes, take care of your colors, and they'll work for you. Okay? And so we're going to take a little bit of that green. We'll work some of that right out here and see how that, and I'll work it even right into some of that wet red that I still have wet here from earlier. It's working right in there. Okay? And we're almost a couple hours into the filming of this, and that's still very wet in here. And nice. And I'll work my colors right in here. Right in there like that. Give some nice movement to her. If I want her to pop forward in some areas, I can darken it down. But I want to get some nice movement in there. But that thickness of that color is so very important. And I say that in a few times in a few of the lessons there. You'll see me go back and restate up and around that bird to make sure that I have good, solid, opaquing color up and around here. That is so very important to making that bird come forward, okay? Good, solid color, even though it looks like you're putting on the same color. And this is what we say as artists, you know, you get interest in life and definition through paint. And if you use more paint, it has more life. And, you know, you may put a coat on and think it's opaque, but, you know, light is traveling through those layers of paint. And, you know, and so this is just giving more interest to it. I can negative paint up like this and soften up her edge and, you know, create that lost edge a little bit and pull back like that so she gets a little fuzzy back there if I want. This allows me to really, truly control, you know, how much of her I want to come forward there. Getting that nice interest right there like that. You know, maybe I want to take a, and I do this, I'll do this. I'll take a little bit of a light. Let's just do this. Take some light, white kind of color right here. And we'll splash that right in there. I do this a lot with flowers. But I'll splash this light right in there like that through her. And we'll just work that color through like that. We'll push her out into that a little bit so get a little lost edge. There, just like that. Get that light and this movement here, which is lovely, you know, into the painting. Let this light brushwork come through like this. Leave a little bit of that to pull the viewer's eye right there into that area of her. Put a little blue right down here, right as it goes into that green. Then we'll just splash a little light right in there. Just work that in, leaving some of that movement there. Not too much into that beak there, Dave. That's why I say you might have to come back and state that beak again. Get a little too casual there. There we go. That just works really well for that and helps pop her right there a little bit farther forward. Now we'll come in and we'll work on some of our other areas, other flowers. You can grab another brush here. I'm going to go to a little bit bigger brush. What is this one? It's the 8. You can go anywhere, 8, 6, you know, any of your bigger brushes into here. I'm just going to work some of the other areas around. I'm going to just do some general painting. We'll step back here a little bit more here so you can see some of this here. Put this on. I'm going to restate some shadows. This is how I go about finishing up some of my design. Of course, I go back and revisit her again, but I'm going to restate some shadows and some greens in through here. And again, you know, even though I had these kind of colors in there before, look at the coloring that's coming through this time. Pine green and black, and you can have a little bit of blue. But look at how that coloring is getting more into it this time as you paint it again. Boy, I tell you, I can't say enough about painting something several times to get this interest into it, you know, and this movement and stuff into it. You need to paint some of these things a couple of times, you know. So, you know, one of the things that she does have, and I didn't really add it to her, so I'm going to do it here real quick. She has a light tail covert. That's right back here. And I'm going to put that on because a lot of birds, you see that on here. I really didn't state that very well on her. So put that light of that. And it's just a nice little tan color. Just a quick little movement there. You just want to do some general large flower feathers. Anywhere down in here you want to do general large feathers. After you put some of these greens on, you may want to take your number 4 and just come down and feather in through here. Let some of those feathers, you know, fade away out to there, run out into the background and stuff. So that works. And you might want to put a little bit more out here onto the tip of the close one, not the far away one, that'll bring it close, but the tip of the close one. Those are little finishing things you can look at. A little more right there makes that one recede. So, you know, those are little finishing things that you can think about doing. Here, let's just race in some greens in here. Get some yellows into that. Race in a little bit of those. Just wow, put some of that movement in. This builds all of this lovely color up here. Lovely, lovely color. And movement out here. Out like that. There we go. We're going to want to have some reds and some yellows out in here to pick up kind of the yellows from her, I think. Some of those colorings out here. Just some movement. This is the way I love to paint, just movement like this. Just love to just take my brush and establish the movement here. Just like that. There we go, out, around and up, around up to there like that. Generally some ideas, maybe some chisel of the brush with some little ideas of stems or long leaf movement there. Ideas coming through. Floating that down like that. Now, come in, let's just take our red right up here by our yellows that we had and our bird colors that are right up here. And that'll harmonize our red right with that color. We're going to go more pinky kind of blossoms, but we'll start out with some reds into them. Pinky and yellow kind of flowers and blossoms here. Put a couple of them together there. A couple of them racing together there. I'm not finding, when I'm painting like this, I'm not finding the shapes yet. I'm just finding color movement. So I don't think about the shapes yet. I'm thinking about color movement. I want to get rid of this white edges of the canvas right there. So I'm just kind of putting them together in here with some color and some movement. I want some red violets in there because that's just beautiful, cool colors. We'll drop some of those in there like that. Okay. And we'll drop some of that right up in here. Finally, now out here, I'm going to have a little bit more of an idea, like the shape of a flower, because I'm out here in the open here. So I might just give a little bit more of an idea of a shape or so here to these flowers and push back out like that. But generally, I don't get too tangled up into the details right now, because that's just going to make your painting stiff. So just move some color back here, like there's some stuff going on here, but not too much to contrast her. So I got to be careful that I don't put anything in there that's going to fight against her. Okay, that she keeps that nice open area up there. That's what I want to do. And let's get some leaf shadow in there, some black and green and a little bit of blue, nice cooler, darker. Let's get a little leaf shadow in there happening. Nice dark color right in here. We'll get some of that movement in. Okay, let's go back to our reds, some yellows, nice tone colors. Let's get some whites in here for some light colors. Start to add a little bit of that light there. Take a look at this soft peachy kind of color we make with that, and see how we like that going in to a shape of a little flower there. So I quickly imagine, okay, boom, I started stroking this and I saw the center as I started to pull in. The center would look nice right there. So that's what I started to build. And I'll pull some down right here. And we'll just get some of this nice, kind of a real tone, peachy color to make a great little tone for some white or pink color later coming. We'll put a little edge onto this one. Let's put some into this one here. Pushing in and out. Push in and out of the center. There, like that. Pretty little flowers. Here. Go. Little ones there in the back. Little touches back up here to these. Just a little bit. Just make sure that color shows up out there and you're in good shape. Okay. It's all about the color. The viewer doesn't need to have a tremendous amount of shape to these. We don't. We have the area of interest already defined, which is her. So we don't need a whole lot going on in these other things. We just need to put on some shapes and make it look like some flowers. Just some shapes. Here, just like that. And we'll lighten up a bit. And we're going to red up some or peachy up some. Let's take some yellow and some red right up here. Really orange. Add a little bit of our burnt sienna and stuff, colors to that, tone that down. Let's just add a little bit of that. And that'll just pick up a little bit more color from, kind of from her, but be a touch different. Add some of that tone into some of these, especially around the center here. Around like that. That's pretty good. And we'll just take the white right up by the edge of that. And we'll still add some reds and stuff, but we'll just come in and set some light petals here. Just light strokes to these little petals. Little flowers like this. Imagine little blossom petals here. Now I've got all these tones and all this lovely movement and stuff into these tones. So these flowers, I've just got to give them a little bit of idea or shape to a petal. That's all I need. Just a stroke or two, because they've already got all the tones in them. So I just have to like give the ideas of, here's a couple of petals here. Watch how they play up against her here. And if it's too much, like it's taken away from her too much, just touch the petal again and it'll soften it down. There we go, just out like that. Very casual. We pull in towards, it's like I start to build a shape of something, and then I say, oh, okay, that's going to be a center. I just start stroking first, and then I'll start to read what the little flower says. So my plan says these are just soft little flowers in here, maybe colors of her right around in this area. I don't know the exact shape of these, and that's what helps keep them so soft. So I don't know the exact shape of these as I paint them, and I just want to give the impressions of pulling some petals here in towards the center, keeping the lights and stuff like that very much towards her. All the lighter petals that I pull are up here towards her. I can put like a little orange in my brush and lift out like this to, if I think I get too much light that it competes against her, lift out some of those highlights and soften some of those down. So just a little bit goes in towards her there. Go like that. Just some in there. That's another little one right there. We'll just casually take a few little lights up here, moving up here. Just casually, a few little lights. Those oranges up here, just a touch or two. Here. Out like that. That's a little petal there. Always watch back up against her there that you don't take too much away from her. And I do this with, all throughout the paintings, the cardinals, the little white, blossoms and stuff, and around the goldfinches with the red ones and stuff. This is how I paint them. I just go around and around and around, come back and revisit some with a little more touch here and there sometimes, if they can afford it, having it against her here. How much goes up against them. And again, it just helps your eye come back up into this area. This is where I want the viewer to be, up into this area here. So that works pretty good. We'll take some nice yellow greens here. Some Hansa Yellow. Just make yourself a big old splash of yellow green here. And then we pick up that color here. We'll splash some of that around. It's nice movement and color difference. Kind of oval it a little bit every once in a while, make it look like a little leaf. But I don't get too lost up into the details of making, precise little leaves or anything like that. That's, not my intention here. My intention is to paint a bird. And I keep that in mind as I'm doing this, so I don't get too much detail going on in some of this other stuff. So I just want to give the idea that these are leaves and things going on. I don't want to get, and we'll fade them away here. Don't want to get too much into it. We'll get some up in here. Some little touches to it. Little movements of this out, little colors out here. You see I go around and around and around. Now generally a lot of times when I'm painting like this, you know, I'll base coat in the bird, you know, put in that original undertone and the shadow tone, then go through and work the flowers. So I do it all as a combination of working the painting. That's generally how I love to do it. It's one of my favorite things to do. But for the ability of filming this and getting a continuity to the techniques of painting the bird, which is the number one thing, we filmed it slightly different. But you can get the idea of this is what I do here. This is how I do it. I'm going to let some of that brighter Hansa play like that. I liked that, how that came out. So that plays very good against her toned color. And that's what I do, is I try. You know, you can have an idea, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Never, never be afraid to alter your plan. You know, as something comes up or you discover a new way or a new thing, don't be afraid to alter your plan and adjust the painting accordingly. I'll do that. That's what keeps the art fresh, what keeps it going. You know, it just makes it fun. Makes the whole painting fun. Let's go through. Do one more little time of white. So she sits up against some nice, pretty little whitish type blossoms there. Definitely up into the center. See, I do it again. And that's really nice. And we'll be able to take some of that real light color and go back and hit her again with that. Not hit her, but give her another little bit of light. So she just comes up a little bit more. And I'll look out to these areas. Generally, these are all real soft, so I'll maybe just hit a couple of them here. So a couple stand out more than the others do. Okay. Let's tap in a little burnt sienna red violet. Put that on the corner of the brush, and let's just tap in a little cool but brownish type center. Some of these. Doesn't have to be perfect, but put just a soft one in back here. Little idea. Back there. Just a little idea of those. And then we'll take a little corner of Hansa right into some of this brown and white. Just push it onto the corner. This is how I like to do a lot of the real casual centers that I do on flowers. And just tap that corner around and around and around. So I pick up that corner, maybe tap it into some whites and browns so I'll get a mottled look to it. Here I'm going to set up kind of a heavy in the center and just tap it around a little bit, and it fades off into that wet color. And I leave it. And you don't make, you know, well, it's almost impossible to make each one the same, and you don't want each one the same. So just kind of tap it around. Don't want each one the same. I'll use the other corner of the brush if I feel like having a hard time softening it. And I want these really soft back here. Just a little tiny touch of it. Just to say you did it, because you want these to fade away back here. Just enough to say you did it. Put some onto this one, right here. This one right here. Put a little onto this one there. Touch or two as that goes around. We'll put on a more looks of petal look here to this. Shape up these petals just a bit more. You can pull out like this and set it down like this. And I do this on several petals. I'll wipe the brush and negative paint by lifting off. Lifting off, and I show this lifting off, negative painting and stuff. We show this in several flower painting techniques of Paint It Simply. Very, very important. So if I want to give more shape like to this petal here, I have that light. I can wipe my brush so I don't have any paint on it, and then just lift off like this. And I can go back, and it makes it look almost like a negative paint because, or like the little edge or the highlight of her wing there, because that is what I have, the shadow to the light there. So when I can work back and forth a little bit until I get a little bit of the look that I want to have to that particular petal there. So that looks pretty nice there. Let's back up just a bit more. Get a good feeling for the painting here. For the overall look of the painting here, you know, better feeling for it. I'm going to go back to my smaller little number 4 here. We're going to go back and put a little burnt sienna into some of this green that's down here. I'm going to restate my some of my stems through here. Sometimes I will help do that with, like if it doesn't show up too well, with like a yellow or yellow movement of that. We might even put a touch of that yellow here onto the stem right in that area. Just slide the brush of the chisel, and color will come off uneven, get a little drag, and that'll look just like highlights, shadows, and stuff like that. But right where it's coming into here, I might want to just lift that off so it looks like it's going into shadow there. But let's just take some of that, and we'll just create some other little stems, like to your flowers out like that. Little stem movements, and out and around, and out through the painting out this way. I love just to take and just drag the corner of the brush like this out, and just create some different lines of movement out and away from the painting. It kind of lightens it up and opens it up a bit. And we'll put on a few more little things to the painting here as well. A few more little stuff going on in here. And little idea of a calyx there, and a stem coming back and around. Little things. Maybe the idea of we'll just go right up there like that with another little stem that's coming up. Another little branch or stem here. The idea just there, that's coming up through like that. And this is where the painting to me is fun. Now, see, none of this part was really part of my plan except for staying away from her. So I'm letting this painting kind of evolve, and that's where it comes from. If, a lot of people say, well, how do you get all this life and energy and everything to your painting? It's because I don't completely plan out my painting. So here, like this little stem was just an idea that just came to me. So it came to me as I'm painting this. So go explore it. Go give it a try. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and and I'll end up changing it. But sometimes it does, and it's awesome. You just let it happen. That's the whole thing is. As I become more and more casual with my painting, my plan is still well thought out as far as color and interest, and how I'm going to render the details on something. How much do I want to do on her as opposed to everything else? My plan is well thought out that way. But as far as, what's all going to happen, not necessarily. I just may say, okay, and then I'll get into this part of painting and we'll see what happens. And I do that a lot, into my painting here. So now we'll just get a little bit of dark contrast here. That dark contrast that I use everywhere else is kind of important to have it in a few places. Not quite that much, but I'm watching my color movement all around. So I do want to get some of this dark up in here. Just share it up here a little bit. I don't want to get too much of it here. Just share it up there a little bit so you can get some of that around, and some of this other movement, and light green, dark stuff, just, some other little stems and ideas of other little leaves, just little movements, touches of the brush through the painting here. like that. It makes a pretty little painting. And so now we've got a orange. Her legs are kind of orange. We shouldn't forget to give her some legs. But generally the bird's legs are like big, gigantic, I always call them they're almost Jurassic looking. They're so huge, talons, of course they grip onto everything. And so I generally try to hide them by flowers, and I don't have a problem here. I've hid them pretty well back behind here. So, but we'll give the idea of her legs back in through here someplace. And then we'll set those in. And a lot of times after I set those in, I'll come back with my brush. Here, I'll use my little number 4 here. And we'll just grab some light feathering color. Here are the feathers, and we'll just generally set those over here. Okay, over some of that. So it just sets those legs in there a bit. And I don't do too much to them. Maybe a little highlight every once in a while or something. But I generally understate them. I don't do too much to her legs. I may pull, on some of them, I may pull some, nice feathering color down, creating kind of like a thigh or something down through there. Sometimes I'll do that. But I don't get too wrapped up in all of that detail there. So I may just pull a few little, lightly with the brush, just like this, a few little hairs, kind of stuff, set it up over the legs. We'll just feather that in just a bit. Go back to the look of the large area feathers, soften that out. That looks pretty good right in there. Some of the things I like to do here towards the end of the painting, and I'll go back and revisit her just one more time here. And look at, I got all this interest and stuff into her. I want to get into these flowers and stuff. I'm going to take a little bit of that orange from her legs and just tap a little bit of that into her right in there. We'll grab a little bit of that yellow light highlight there. I'm going to add just a touch of that into that. Just gives a little bit more to that beak here, which she can have, a little shine right there, which she can have. Let's get right up into some of that white and yellow. This is the light white and yellow. And I really want to kind of feather up over. I love to put these, you'll see me grab these scapular type feathers here and really kind of feather up this area right over the, especially right where it goes over the little coverts here, and grab this. Sometimes I do it wet so I get a mixing of it. Sometimes I'll do it where it's dry. And you can take any kind of slightly darker color and paint back into those to add some. Sometimes I do it just real quick and just pull right across and get it done, sometimes even with a number 4. I'll get all kinds of looks to it. But here I'm just going to add some of this in here, just because that's night. I'm going to lead from this interest right into here. I want this reaction happening right in here. So I'm going to work on this area here to get a reaction between the front part of her body right here, which means lightening this up and getting a little bit more feathering stuff right in here. So your eye is going to lead right around in here like that. That's the expression that I want to get on her. Now that I've got those flowers in, I saw that happening, I adjust some of my plan to come in here with some of this. I'm going to take some of this nice coloring in here, brown that up just a bit, and I'm going to work the feathers right back in here again between my tones, between my light dark tones, just to feather a little bit more here and establish just a little bit more feathering detail right in here. That's going to work quite nice. That light color is going to pull her right up in there. Light and dark. I'll work those back and forth just a bit. Here. Pull that in. I'm going to pull a little bit more down with burnt sienna, black. So again, see, even I put those lights on, I really like them. I'm going to work my darks back up in here again too, because the darks are necessary for the contrast. You're trying to get a contrast of light and dark. So I'm just reworking these feathers. Just let's see how that dark just feathers those in there so nice. So we'll take just a little bit, yellow that up a bit, add some of those. Let's get just a little bit more orange on the burnt sienna side. These. See, I'm getting all those lovely tones now. That's what I'm looking for. Those lovely tones in there. Get some more of this toned yellow. So see, I just love to drag that brush like that. See that? And it just, if I just lightly drag it with that tone in there, I get these lovely feathers into that wet, thick paint. And we'll grab that white. And see, that's where those feathers come from, just like that. And I'll sometimes drag that edge, sometimes leave that edge there. There we go, like that. So I'm really building and working on that light area right in here so I get that reaction built up. And I can assist that reaction by turning some of these, instead of turning them that way, turn some of these out ever so slightly here. Then around and up that way. So it gives just a little different feel to her neck area there. There we go. And we'll light up heavy white. Pull some of this right out onto that background there, and that just feathers that up even more. You know, grab just a little bit of that light right out onto the edge, over the into the blue. And you can work that back and forth like that a bit. Pull that back in, and then pull these out like that, see? And so you can state that line several times because of that nice thick paint. The thick paint doesn't flow together. Well, it flows. We call it flow, but it's like marbleizing it. It moves together, but still holds its identity. And a thin flow acrylic will not do that. So I want to have some of that in there. So that's pretty nice. Let's just work her tones. Here, like that. Just work some final little bits. Whoa, that's a little dark there. A little quick. You can lift some of that out. Like that. Maybe leave a little bit of that. There. But we like a little bit of that tone. Right down there like that. So that really feathers up this whole area of her. Working on some of those lights and dark feathers pulling across there. That's kind of nice. How they're all coming together there. So she's really got a lot going on there. Get some lighter, final little lighter yellowy ones. Showing up right in there in her face. There, I like those. I love to really kind of pull these feathers right by the face here. That just gives, I'm watching the reaction with her eye. How much interest that gives to her eye. There. And move from these small little things into just a little bit, follow contours, little tiny bit longer, then into the longest ones. Follow her contours. Just tap those all in there. And she's a pretty little bird sitting now in these, in just a couple hours, you paint yourself a nice little painting here, nice little setup of a painting here, following some of the techniques and stuff with the bird and in the book there. Okay, so you have this whole book, you have all of these lovely lessons that are in here that's just going to show you all different kinds of ways. I'll talk to you about, imagine it, but most important than anything else is before you start painting, make sure that you follow through those steps several times and read what I write about these birds and stuff like that into the very beginning of the book here. It tells some of the thought process that I have when I'm starting to develop my plan, just a little bit of the thought of it, and especially down into those cardinals, when I get into that sfumato technique of the cardinal, when I got him too bright, then how you take that back. It's a lovely technique of just taking some color. And you could do that like in here to recede. You use kind of a grayish kind of color. And, we have our background kind of color that, in our painting here, and which is kind of a grayish color. And even adding a little bit of the body color of her to that. And really what that says is Da Vinci uses a lot, and you just kind of go over the back edge like her, and you can see how that recedes her, puts that back in, and drops your eye right up into the front of her there. So you could use that lightly onto an edge and that just helps get a little roundness or a little lost edge to her, bringing more interest and stuff like that into the front part. That's all techniques that you can do that help develop your plan, that developing your plan or developing your painting. And you always want to look for that found edge to that lost edge. So here, the very found edge of her beak and everything is pulling your eye up into this edge in here. And as I go out, the flowers get lost, her edges and stuff get lost, and that just makes a really pretty painting drawing right up in here. Okay? Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy the book. And as always, look to the Jansen Art Studio for all different kinds of techniques. And if you enjoyed the Art of Painting series here, where you're listening to my thought processes as we go about putting a painting together like this, look for more of those. We have another couple of books coming, some roses and some landscapes coming in the Art of Painting series. And I hope you look for those. Thanks a lot for joining me today. Enjoy your book. And I hope to see you in the future here at the Jansen Art Studio or painting in one of our seminars. Take care. Have a great time. Bye-bye.